Okay, welcome back to the Motherhood Collective Co. I just had to slide my little foamy part down over my mic, so sorry if that sounded atrocious. And also, Brady's going to be bringing me Lily here in a minute, so we will be interrupted, but it will be fine.
Do you ever like meet a new person or like a new group of friends and you're not really sure if you want to tell them about our podcast?
Yes, all the time. I don't like my neighborhood group. I kind of tell them like I have a podcast, and obviously Bailey knows we have a podcast, but also I'm like, don't listen to it, please.
I just started MOPS this week, and it was very bizarre because we did our intros, and I think I said like, these are my kids, like I'm a writer, and I kind of left it at that. And then there was a girl at the table that said, you have a podcast too. And I was like, oh yeah, I forget about that sometimes. I didn't even know she listened to the podcast. We're kind of just friends online. We knew each other a long time ago, but anyways, and all of the girls were like, oh, will you send your podcast in the group text and all this stuff? And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that because I didn't say that.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. And I never did because I feel like it's such a one-sided friendship where you all of a sudden have this key to like know everything about me without sharing nothing, like anything about yourself.
Yeah.
And I also don't want you to like just kind of formulate an opinion about me without the relationship attached to it, which maybe that's what a podcast is in general. Like maybe you guys think you know us through this, but I think we've always talked about how vulnerable a podcast is because you don't know us. You just know our opinions about certain topics, you know?
And our opinions when we're talking in a very safe space.
Yeah. This is, you guys, like, we're literally just two best friends talking as if we're just talking.
Do you remember our assumptions episode? And someone was like, I think Amanda would annihilate someone if you made her mad with her kids. And like, yes, obviously I'm a mother and like, don't mess with my kids. But also like, I don't think that you can really understand how non-aggressive I am and how like non-confrontational I am in real life through this podcast. You know what I mean?
And like, a human is just like so multifaceted, you know? So just anyways, I just thought that was kind of funny. I just kind of like winced a little of like, oh yeah, we do have that. And then I just gave you all the credit. I was like, yeah, Amanda does like all the things. I was just kind of like rambling. I was like, yeah, I like forget about that because Amanda like edits it and like, why did I don't know. I get so weird about stuff like that. I'm fine being like, I'm a writer. I also don't usually tell people that I already have a book published because I published that when I was barely in college. And so it's like all of my writings from like genuinely like middle school, high school, college, like
a person that you aren't
seeking,
anymore.
finding yourself, like all the breakups, the heartache, the rejection, like this stuff you go through when you're a teenager. Anyways, I just thought that was funny. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this really quickly and then Amanda and I can kind of have a little discussion, but Eli Hardwood just recently published this book.
What episode number is she in? We have a whole episode with her. It's like one of our very first ones. Let me look the episode number up for you guys.
So Eli, a little backstory. She is a family trauma therapist, family and trauma therapist. She was my therapist for most of my life. I started seeing her after I was, I think I was in high school. And my most recent meeting with her was like after Ledger was born to process my birth a little bit. We don't meet like super regularly, but she walked through a few really hard seasons with me. So I just like really adore her as a human being. And she has just like blown up. So I always admired her, but she has become such a big deal online and in person, like she's speaking at conferences, becoming a really big deal on TikTok and Instagram. And the other day, this past week, she was actually on Good Morning America.
Oh, that's wild.
So she's really an amazing human. You just like meet her and you just love her. And so anyway, she just published this book. It's called Raising Securely Attached Kids Using Connection-Focused Parenting to Create Confidence, Empathy, and Resilience. And Eli is someone I love to troubleshoot with when it comes to parenting, because I just feel like she makes you feel like things are just like not as difficult as we make them out to be in our brains. She just has a way of like pacifying my concerns. And I just think like her book will be such a great snapshot if you want to buy that or look into it or get the I'm actually reading it physically, but I also have it on audiobook, just depending on, like, what I'm able to. She does.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
she's in episode 11, by the way. We have an interview. It's called Interview with Attachment Nerd, Eli Hardwood. Isn't her handle Attachment Nerd?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's episode 11 if you want to go and listen to that. That was like obviously episode 11, one of our very first ones. Our interview skills probably are not like great, but go listen to it.
I know, she's so sweet. She's like always been like our fan. But no, we also like really connected because she had like an unexpected C-section with her first baby. She dealt with a lot of like miscarriages and stuff before pursuing fertility treatment to get pregnant with her twins. But she was like able to just walk me through that season, even just from like a clinical perspective. I don't know. She's like a wealth of knowledge, and I don't say that lightly about many people. But anyways, I am a few chapters in. I came across this little template that I will do my best to like make sense of as I speak it out, because it's like a graph, and maybe we can post it to our stories or something. I don't know, or if you just message us, I'll send you a picture of it. But basically throughout the first part of her book, she talks about 3 different specific parenting styles. The first is like a compliance dominant based approach. So that being like your biggest goal is compliance and control. Then there's an indulgence pacification based approach, which your biggest goal there is just like avoiding conflict, prioritizing harmony in your relationship. You often see these parents like almost afraid of their own kids. And you can tell there's like often just like that insecurity in their kid. Like, are you in charge? Am I in charge? I don't know, because they just want everything to go smoothly. And then the cooperation-based approach, which is obviously what she is advocating for, prioritizes the relationship and growth, like mutual growth. So here's a little bit about each one. And I thought it would be fun to like listen and kind of think like, what would we naturally gravitate towards? Maybe what our husbands would naturally gravitate towards, maybe how they were raised, and like how we want to be. I don't know. That's kind of what I've been doing this whole book, of just kind of like quizzing myself a little bit.
Let's do it.
So the compliance dominance based approach, I'm going to have to go through each one every time I give an example so that we can see all of them like side by side instead of reading the chart down, if that makes sense. Compliance dominant based says, I am the boss. So it's, the very like intimidating, stand over you, shaking your finger over someone, like, I'm the boss, listen to me, I have control over the situation. The indulgence pacification based approach says whatever you want to the kid, like truly whatever you want. I just don't want to have to deal with the repercussions of the no's. So I'm just going to say yes. And I'm just going to, find a little reason to cause friction in our relationship. And then the cooperation based approach says, I've got you. And I love how she says that, because it's like, it goes without saying that I'm in charge of you and I'm like looking after you, but also we're not going to have to go there and have that power struggle. It's just understood, and you can feel like safe in my guidance. The compliance dominant based approach uses fear, shame, guilt, dominance, and violence as a means to get them to behave. The indulgence pacification based approach uses bribes. So like, please listen to me and I will like X, Y, and Z. Or like maybe your kid is like having a really hard time leaving the park and you're like, please just get in the car. I have candy and it'll be fine. The cooperation based approach uses empathy, consistency, playfulness, communication, and structure. So that's the whole, like, your kid doesn't want to go to bed. Okay, well, let's like pretend we're a certain animal and we'll hop up the stairs like kangaroos. And then maybe we can brush our teeth like we're chimpanzees, and, just like introducing a level of playfulness that's still getting the end goal, but it's not using dominance or fear or bribes. And then the compliance dominance based approach uses emotional distancing, or creates emotional distancing. So your child starts to realize, like, I'm not very safe with you. I'm just going to kind of keep things to myself and show up for you in the ways that you're expecting me to. But it's not creating true heart change. It's just creating like behavior modification, which is not the end goal. The indulgence pacification based approach creates emotional enmeshment. So that's when like you see the parent doesn't really have a backbone. The kid knows the parent doesn't really have a backbone. And so you become each other's like dysregulation, and you're kind of sometimes looking at your kid to help regulate you. And there's all these like blurred lines because there's no boundaries. The cooperation based approach creates emotional resiliency. So we're like really getting to the heart of things. We're not brushing things off or pushing them away. We're not forcing them to go deal with things on their own, but we're also not becoming dysregulated alongside them. Mm-hmm. So they have the space to process things. Okay, there's 2 more lines. Compliance dominance based approach teaches that power is more important than compassion, which, gosh, I feel like I know so many people, we can talk about this, but I feel like I know so many parents in the older generations that parented out of this way. The indulgence pacification based approach teaches entitlement and soothing through consumption, which I thought her wording here was so interesting, because I almost feel like the compliance dominant based approach was a lot of our parents. And I almost see this like swing to the opposite direction of like the indulgence pacification based approach, where it's like, you know, like, yes, whatever you want. Like, I don't want you to feel like you don't have a voice. Like, I want, you know, and it's like coming from such a good place, but then you're creating this like entitlement, and kids who think that how they deal with and cope with their emotions is by consumption, which I thought was so interesting. So whether that's like food or like buying things or, you know, making plans or just like going, because they were never taught like to look more internally. The cooperation-based approach teaches that a parent is a reliable place to find care and guidance. Love that. And then this is the last line. Compliance dominant-based approach. Kids learn to hide their misbehavior. So they're like so terrified of their parents that they're just going to do things behind their back. If they mess up, they're the last person that's going to know about it. And what you get is like that behavior modification. You get a kid that's behaving in front of your face, but you have no connection with them emotionally because they're just doing everything behind your back. The indulgence pacification based approach, kids learn that their misbehavior is effective. So it's like that negative conditioning where it's like, well, if I throw a tantrum in the store, my mom doesn't want to deal with the tantrum. So then I get what I was originally tantruming for, instead of, you know, holding your ground. The cooperation based approach, kids learn how to understand their behavior and make changes. So I was like, you know, reading over this, and personally, I identify the least with the indulgence pacification based approach. I feel like I've tried my hardest to ensure that Sunny and Ledger always feel like I've got myself under control. I've got situations under control. My no is no. My yes is yes. I will not budge. You can throw your tantrum if you need to, but I'm not changing my answer. And while that can be uncomfortable, I just feel like it creates such a safety in the relationship of like, oh, mom says what she means and means what she says. I don't have to try to read between the lines. There's not like, you know, retaliation in coming through the form of like an insecurity of like who's really in charge here, you know? And I feel like I'm not trying to like toot my own horn. I do feel like I parent the most through the cooperation based approach. Like I do think that probably because of Eli, like she's just like my parenting coach inside my brain, I think. And so she's introduced things to me that like reading her book, I'm like, oh yeah. But it's like, because she's kind of coached me through a lot of things. And then the compliance dominance based approach is something that makes me really sad. And I've seen a lot of people parented that way. That have turned out to just be very emotionally dysregulated adults.
Let me give you a theory I have.
And here's this, if you want to like look at it. I don't know if that makes more sense to see the visual.
I have a theory because listening to all of these, I feel like these 3 things happen, not these 3 things, maybe the first 2 things happen in cycles until a cycle is broken. And I see this in my family a lot. So like my great grandmother was alive and a young adult in the Great Depression. She and her husband parented my grandmother with compliance because that meant you survived. She was parented that way because if she didn't go out and find food, they were going to starve to death.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so compliance based was very like survival mode, which turned either, and I think my grandma was more indulgence with my mom and my aunt because she was parented with compliance. Does that make sense? And then I feel like my dad, all down the line, my dad is like if anybody like met my dad, you just, he's the guy you're going to go to in an apocalypse. He can just like walk out in his backyard and come inside with a full table of food to feed 10 people. Like it's just wild. But he's comes from a very long line where girls, me and my sister were like the first girls born into the Lucas side of the family in like 80 years. So it's like very male dominance, and we get a lot of this compliance based, punishment based. So like me as a child, my mother was very indulgent. My father was very compliance dominant based. We used to have like a 5-minute rule. If I didn't walk into your room and it was clean in 5 minutes, you were getting hit with a paddle. Yeah. If mom told me you were bad, the paddle is hanging on the wall, you're getting hit. If you're not going to bed, you're getting hit. You know what I mean? So like when you're reading those, I was like, I was totally
that's really interesting
doing that in my head. But I think once you come out of the survival, that compliance can fall away, and then you get into the indulgence, and then you, I feel like I at least have been someone in my family who's been a cycle breaker for everything. And I'm not perfect at it. I'm literally the first one to I wouldn't say the first one, but I feel like I've broken all of the things. So I do feel like I am more of a cooperation based approach, but I do identify least with compliance. Yeah. If I lean one way or the other in my worst moments, it's indulgence because I've had compliance. Do you know what I mean? And that's just not, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's how my husband was raised. And I think there's something about the compliance dominant based approach takes our children's behavior so personally. Yeah. Where we think that like, what they're doing, everything is disrespect. Everything is an attack against me as a human. And I think they're so enmeshed with their kids and like the image of things. And they have no tolerance for any kind of misbehavior. And it's not about teaching. It's just about like become. Yes. Just figure it out and become this way. Yes. And
why aren't you already this way?
Why aren't you already this way? And I do think that most of like the boomer generation, that's like what they knew. And maybe you're right about kind of like the times and the circumstances. I'll be curious to see what people say about our generation and the times and the circumstances we had to parent through, because I think between all of the political stuff, the violence, pandemic. the pandemic, like the shootings, the violence, the social media, the phones, like I do think we're parenting through unprecedented times. And I'm not trying to compare or contrast, but I do think that there's something to be said about like, okay, we're doing things in a time that nobody really could tell us, oh, we did that and we're fine. Yes. No, like we're all trying to figure it out for the first time. And I think, I don't know, I think what's cool about the cooperation based approach is you view your children as someone who's like, they're completely separate from you. They're under your stewardship, and it's your job to teach them things. But even a friend of mine today, we were at school, our kids are in a homeschool co-op from like, I think I got there at 8:30. I left at 2:30 and I left an hour early. And we were sitting at lunch and I like almost wanted to cry. Like I was just feeling so overwhelmed, and I was like, I just like want to cry right now. She's like, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I really want Sunny to like learn, and I want to be there for her, and I want to help her with all of these things. But then at the same time, I like don't know what to do with Ledger because he's so mobile and he needs me all the time, and he's getting into things and he's pulling down people's backpacks and he's, all of these things. And if you're just now tuning into this, it's like a co-op that you're at all day. Like I'm not dropping her off. So I'm there all day. We all rotate teaching subjects. There's worship time. It is such a beautiful, wonderful program. And I'm so grateful for it. I'm just sitting there like processing with my friend. I'm like, how do we figure this out? And she was like, I think the whole point of this is that we're all learning it for the first time. And we're also trying to teach our kids how to operate in this environment. They shouldn't show up already knowing what to do. Because I was also kind of talking to her about how Sunny is like turned out to be the class clown. I don't know I don't know why this is the first curveball I've ever been thrown. I thought I knew this girl. Today they're going around, they're like, everybody tell us your name and tell us why you love your name. And there's like 4 or 5 kids before her that are like, my name is this. I love it because it means God's goodness. This is my name and I love it because X, Y, and Z. And it's Sunny's turn. She goes, my name is Sunny. I love trash cans. And everybody just dies, like rolling on the floor laughing. And I'm like, okay, where in the world did that come from? Well, then it was like the inside joke in class all day long. Trash cans this, trash cans that. She gets up for show and tell and she literally puts her hands on her hips and she pauses. She like looks down. She's like, so trash cans, and everybody's dying. And I'm just like, I did not. And so I'm laughing, but then I'm also like, okay, in what part of this am I supposed to let her be a kid? What is the correction? What does this look like?
Yeah.
I'm like overthinking it. And I'm talking to my friend out at lunch and I'm like, I just don't know what to do, you know? And she's like, I think that's why we're here, is because like they need to learn. They've never been in a situation like this where they need to learn how to act before. And I don't know why it took so much pressure off of me of like, I think every time we think our kids already need to be there, they like their behavior needs to be X, Y, and Z. It's like our role is to help them learn. So if we can like learn how to stop being so dysregulated by the bumps and just ride them for what they are and realize like, I am not my kid. They are not me. I'm here to help them learn a better way. I don't know why that's such a light bulb for me. It's like, oh yeah, they don't know anything. We're teaching them everything. Like there's so much grace that comes with that, you know? So I don't know. That was just something I was kind of processing through today. And
you know what's funny is I also had to process something extremely similar
today,
because we've been working with like the first step to reading is being able to rhyme. And I was telling Brady this morning too. I was like, this is my first time teaching kindergarten. So like, I don't know what I'm doing. But I'm just following this curriculum and I'm going through it, but I know my kid. So and Noah is good at everything he does. My child, like literally he started what was supposed to be t-ball this past weekend, but they pitched the first couple times and then once you fail the pitch they do the tee. Noah never had to use the tee. The first time he hit the ball, he hit a home run while we were at our book club this weekend. Like Brady's got all these videos and he never used the tee. Like that is just like such a Noah thing. He's just good at things. So when we started to do rhyming, and he's very not good at it yet, it was like kind of came to a shock to me. And then I had to like, okay, step back and I had to figure it out. Well, what I learned, when we would start, we've done like 10 different games, like trying to make it fun for him and like trying to get him to like actually understand it. He, cause his personality in a classroom setting, cause he's been in a few classroom settings, is teacher's pet. He wants to please the teacher. He wants to be friends with the teacher. He wants the teacher to know he's good at things. I'm the teacher. So he's finding ways to pacify me when we're playing this game. Like if he gets a rhyme wrong, he's like, oh, that was an accident. And so I've had so many conversations with him about, hey buddy, it wasn't an accident. Like I need you to be honest with me and tell me if you're not getting something. And then we were playing another game where we were doing, we were singing the song Down by the Bay. And then he was supposed to be coming up with the words, but because he's, you know, I'm stripping it back a little bit. I'm like, I want you to identify the rhyming words. Have you ever seen a goose kissing a moose down by the bay, right? What are the rhyming words? And he was getting them right. And I'm like, that's so good, Noah. He goes, Mom, I got to be honest. I said, what? I'm just guessing. And I keep guessing right. And I'm like, okay, let's drive. So we went on a drive. And then I started singing the banana song. Like, you know, he would pick a word, fox, bo box, banana, fana, faux fox. And I did that for like 30 minutes. And he goes, I kind of think I'm starting to understand what rhyming is. I'm like, okay, here we go. And we had to have a whole conversation about, we're starting here at point A. The goal at point B is to get you to rhyme. And I told him, I was like, you want to be at point B and you're very embarrassed for whatever reason with your own mother that you're not at point B, that you keep making excuses or whatever it is, or like trying to, I don't know. But I told him like, we have to do all this middle stuff first. And I said, I'm teaching you for the first time. So I'm also in this middle with you. So like we literally had like in a car ride on the way to the dentist, that like same conversation.
I know, it's so funny. I almost think it's like, I think school and learning in new environments like that almost just, they kind of like present in a way that you're a little bit thrown off guard. Like you haven't really fully processed what that is going to look like and how the bumps go. And I have such a hard time. Like truly, I think one of my hardest parts about being a mom is trying to navigate like letting her be a kid and where do I step in and intervene. And I think that I err on the side of just being a lot more strict. Like I think I have such high expectations for myself. I'm really hard on myself. And so I think that pours over to my family. Sometimes it pours over to my husband, it pours over to my kids. And I don't want it to, because I recognize that like my inner critic is like unreal. Like if you heard the stuff that goes through my head every day, like you would be exhausted. I'm sure anyone would. And so I think internally they're not even like voiced expectations. I just expect her to act a certain way or be a certain way, and so then when that's ruffled, like never would have thought she'd be the class clown. I thought maybe she would struggle speaking up. I thought maybe she would be like a little bit social, side conversations. I could see like, that kind, but I never, like maybe having a hard time sitting still. Like I just never pictured her, getting such a kick out of making the whole class like roll on their bellies. And so, anyways, I think just like taking a step back and being like trying to evaluate when to intervene and when to just be like, okay, you know what, she's a kid, has been the hardest part of being a mom. And I think I way too often intervene where I could just sit back and be like, let you figure it out and be a kid, even like at the birthday party, like I was kind of just letting her open gifts as they came. I was never going to have like a set aside, like open all the presents, everybody watch, because I hate doing that myself. Like I just feel like it's so much pressure, and I didn't want to put that on her. I just wanted, like, she's excited to see a gift, open it, great. Like, and my natural inclination would be like, go, like, okay, say thank you. And if I waited even 5 seconds before I said that, she always said it. Yeah. She would always find the person, say thank you. And I'm like, oh, I just need to chill. Yeah. Like teach the things for sure. But then like get to a point where like, okay, now we're going to, sit back and observe. But I don't know. That's one of the hardest parts for me of like not mothering a preschooler. Yeah. Just trying to figure that out.
It's a whole different ball game.
Yeah. And like wanting them to like also wanting to foster who they are, and then also trying to like guide them in the right direction. And I genuinely have no idea what that looks like in this school situation right now. She's also the youngest in her class. She's, it's so like, I don't know. There's so many like, what's it called? It's so multifaceted, because I'm genuinely like so proud of her because she's the youngest in her class. She gets up on the stage at show and tell. There's like so many kids in her class, and half of them get up there and they're like so shy and quiet. You can barely hear what they're saying. They're not making eye contact. They're nervous, which is totally fine and normal. And then Sunny gets up there and she's like, hi, I'm Sunny. And like says what she means what she clearly communicates. She makes eye contact. She takes up space and she's not afraid to. So I'm like, I'm so proud of you. Like trying to maybe like ponder those situations more than, like where you're pleasantly surprised instead of where you're like, well, what in the world do I do with this now?
I think that's hilarious. And I think that it'll be fine.
Well, that's why we left early too, because I just was like, she was so tired and loopy and most of those kids don't nap anymore. And Sunny usually still does. And so I don't know. It's just, anyways, I found this chart. I was listening to this on the drive home today, and I just found it to be really cool. And I feel like something she does right before this chart is she gives you like this one. I'll read this one. She gives you like tips, scripts for each age. So like infant, baby, toddler, preschool, elementary, middle school, high school. Which one should I read?
We'll do toddler, preschool, because that's where we're at.
Okay, those are two different ones. So we'll start with toddler. Toddler tip. Toddlers are in the middle of a massive brain leap and are prone to humongous mood swings and getting deeply upset about seemingly small things. It's typical and it is not permanent. Model staying calm and compassionate while maintaining structure. That sentence summarizes like everything I believe about parenting. Model staying calm and compassionate while maintaining structure. Like you don't have to compromise on structure to be compassionate, and you don't have to compromise on compassion to maintain structure. Make structure easy to remember using visuals and songs. Toddler scripts. This feels very hard for you. I see your pain. We need to do X, but I can hold you first if that will help. Let's act like lions while we insert act here. Preschool tips. Preschoolers are entering the world of social negotiation and often try out sassy and defiant responses. Don't overreact. Don't overreact, but be kind. Simply redirect them to the phrases that will help their voice get heard, and be respectful in reminding them about whatever expectations they might be challenging. We can do this together. Preschool scripts. We can do this together, which is like such a game changer for Sunny. If I ask her to do something, and like versus like, I can do this with you, or we can do this together, it's like such a different response. You can choose which shoes you want to wear, but we do need to have shoes on before we leave. I can see that this is really frustrating to you right now. Do you want some space and time alone? I will always be here to hug you if you want me to. Anyway, she goes through like a lot of things, and there's so much knowledge in this book. And I think, what's different about her, like attachment-based parenting, is that it's not like the gentle parenting that we've come to kind of think
that the internet
is silly.
Determined that, is not a valid way.
It's not like, I don't know if you've seen all of those like TikToks or reels about like people kind of mocking gentle parenting, and it's like their kid is like screaming on the floor in a Target, and they're like laying down with them.
That's exactly what I just said, the fake mom voice.
Yeah.
Oh,
like,
you don't
I'm
do
here.
that.
No, she's like, I'm here with you in your pain, and they're like tantruming on a Target floor, you know? And I feel like that's kind of like what people have come to think about gentle parenting, but like an attachment style parenting and whatever else you want to call it, I don't know. But what I love that she outlines in her book is like, we're still the ones in charge. Our goals are still getting accomplished, and we're trying to navigate how to teach and guide through empathy and compassion and connection.
Which means that like your parenting might look different day to day. Do you know what I mean? Because like if you are truly like securely attached to your child, you're like in tune with their needs for the most part. Not all the time. Sometimes a curveball gets thrown out there. But if you're attuned to their needs, then the way you parent them today might be something different tomorrow, or maybe it's next week, or maybe it's 6 months from now. So I've always really not loved people like tying themselves to a type of parenting, gentle parenting, authoritarian parenting, whatever it is. Like, I don't like you tying yourself to a parenting style. Tie yourself to your child. And like
connection.
Yes, the connection is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like you're going to be able to apologize for your mistakes, and you're going to have relationships with your kids in 25 years. You know what I mean?
I love that. Yeah, it's all about the long term. And that's what I think is so funny about the authoritarian like mindset of things is like, yeah, you're getting your goals accomplished in the interim, but then when you think about long term, like you established no connection, no relationship. You literally just raised a few different robots to operate how you wanted them to in your home. And then the minute they don't need you anymore, there's nothing to stand on. And so I think a lot of those parents, they grow up, they have adult children, and they're the realizing
that, ticked that their parents or their kids don't call them.
Yes. Yes. And they're realizing like, wow, I actually don't have any authority or control over them. And so you'll start seeing like maybe financial things being thrown out of like, how can I tie myself to my kids in a way that they still need me? Because if they don't need me, they don't want me. And I think that like when I think about parenting my kids, all I think about is when Sunny's 30. Like I hardly ever think about who she is as a 4-year-old. Like everything I sow into her is with the benefit of like, in the hope of reaping a relationship long term that says I put in the time and the effort to connect with you, not your behavior, not who you should be or what you aren't or whatever, like who you were. And we did that together every day. And it was messy, and it didn't always look the way I wanted it to, but the goal was always connection. And if that's always your goal, you're gonna have connection.
And I think that's like pretty viral. Well, I say it's pretty viral right now, but I don't really know. But like, I feel like I've seen on Instagram a few times, it's like you actually know your children most of their life as adults. You only get this little time with them as children.
Right.
So to focus on your adult relationship, I think is really important. Because if you're only focusing on the child thing, then you're just focusing on, I got to get them to bed on time. I've got to get them to learn rhyming or not be the class clown. Like if you're only focusing on that, I think you're missing the mark, and it's really going to damage your future relationship.
Totally.
And something that really helps me, because like I feel like I was parented so differently than I parent now, which sometimes is really hard, and it feels lonely and isolating and scary, because you're like, am I messing them up forever because I'm not spanking them when they don't clean their, you know what I mean? Because that's how you were raised. And something that helps me is and I talked about it at the beginning of the episode, but like the cycles of parenting since the Great Depression, because during the Great Depression, mothers were taught that their babies didn't have a soul or a personality until they were 2. So like they were often with wet nurses and not attached at all. And then those babies grew up and were told, picking up your kids spoils them. So they didn't pick up their children. Right. They would just let them cry. Yeah. And then that generation, the boomer generation, gave birth to Gen, what is it, X or Y? I don't know, whatever my mom is. And she was a mom, a teenager and a mom in the 90s. And I feel like that was the first generation that kind of didn't have that, like, our kids are evil robots that want to manipulate us. So I felt like that gave the space, at least for me, to, I don't know, kind of figure out how I wanted to parent. So if you're like struggling with that, I think like look at the cycles of your family, because I can easily trace the cycles of my family to like what was going on in the times and what was being like taught globally. But I do feel like we are a generation that knows and understands that connection is important. And I feel like maybe the first generation that actually has a whole parenting style.
I agree
based on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that there's going to be a lot of beauty that comes from that. And I'll be curious to kind of see like kind of the trend you originally identified when I showed you that chart. I'm curious to see what the future generations swing when I kind of feel like we're like, if the pendulum was like this for so long and it's kind of like leveling out and we're like settling somewhere, I'll be curious to see like what the next generation brings, you know? But I don't know. I just think those kind of things are really interesting to look at.
This generation is very passively, our baby's generation. It's not saying our homes or the homes of our listeners, but as a whole, this generation has been parented very passively. I mean, we went out to eat to a very nice restaurant over the weekend, and in comes this group. Oh my gosh. Parker Garage. So not very nice, but like nicer to bring your children to. And here comes this whole family where all the kids have headphones and iPads. You know what I mean? Because we're just pacifying them to get them to shut up so we can continue on with their lives. Because I also think this generation has been sitting here listening to mommy wine culture for the last 10 years, where it's been cool to bash on your kids and to get drunk and to ignore the hard parts of motherhood and healing yourself for comfort. So it's going to be interesting.
And like not only like pacify it through different kinds of means like that, but also blast it all over the internet to the point where the generation below us are so terrified to have children because they genuinely think it's how your life ends. Like that'll even be an experiment in and of itself, because I don't think, like, we might have heard word of mouth things from generations above us of like, oh yeah, this might be kind of hard, or this might be, but like to be bombarded with that day in and day out on social media, like I will be curious to see what that even does for people who want to have kids or not want to have kids anymore. I don't know. Maybe we are like a little bit maybe countercultural comparatively to the generation that we're parenting alongside. I would
agree with that.
And we have like our own little slice of moms like that live in our area that think the same ways as us, and like shout out to our book club. I feel like that's a really like golden group of women who we kind of all see eye to eye on a lot of things. But I wouldn't say it's the norm, probably.
That's true. That's interesting to think about. So if you're listening to this and we just sound like crazy people,
I know.
Go get the book. Let's talk about the book before we close out.
Yeah. So this is available on Amazon. Like I said, it's just on audiobook as well. And it is just packed with just amazing information. I love Eli, and her little excerpt from Good Morning America is just on YouTube. That's how I found it. I'm never up for Good Morning America, so I just looked it up later. And she just talks about kind of how our kids are going to be acting a little bit differently as we like go back into the school season, and like the rhythms of that, and how to kind of help them through the transitions of things, and why it's like so normal for our kids to go through different phases of behavior depending on what's going on, and just giving them grace and empathy for that. And
I'm excited to read it.
Understanding. So
that's going to be good.
Yeah. Anyways, that's our shameless plug for Eli, because she is amazing.
And if you want to listen to our episode 11 is the episode with Eli.
Yeah, you'll honestly start there, because you'll just fall in love with her, and then you'll be like, of course I want to go listen to her audiobook.
Yeah.
And her voice and maybe I'm biased, but her voice on audiobook is just like so fun to listen to.
Oh,
like
that's
she's
so
just
fun.
like a really fun reader. So anywho, we will record again in a couple weeks, but you'll have episodes every week.
Yeah, we
hopefully.
just double recorded. So
yeah,
you'll be good. Okay, we'll see you next week.
bye.